Okay, so we're picking up the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna tonight. We're on page 654. We're in the chapter called With Various Devotees. And at the time period, Swami Ramakrishna has already had his Mahasamadhi, he's passed away. The young monks have all managed to find an old abandoned haunted building that they've turned into a monastery. And so they're meeting there and doing their practices. And some of the householder devotees are starting to drop in on them. And so in last week's reading, they were just uh, sitting around and doing their meditation and talking about householders versus monastics and um, how the Nitya and the Leela belong to the same reality that when you transcend, I guess, to the ultimate transcendence, although I also suspect there might be something beyond that, but the ultimate transcendence makes a unity out of the absolute unchanging and the constant unrepeating change. The power of God and the principle of God become one in your final transcendence, the highest transcendence. All right, so we're starting on page 654, and the narrator is saying, after the devotees had left the master, Mahimacharan brought Hazra to the room. M was present. Mahima said to Sri Ramakrishna, Sir, I have a complaint against you. Why have you asked Hazra to go home? He has no desire to return to his family. Master. Well, oops, here comes Rajani. Master, his mother has told Ramlal how much she is suffering on account of his being away from home. So I have asked Hazra to go home, at least for 3 days, and see her. Can anyone succeed in spiritual discipline if it causes suffering to his mother? While visiting Brindavan, I had almost made up my mind to live there when I remembered my mother. I said to myself, my mother will weep if I stay away from her. So I returned here with Mathur Babu. Besides, why would a Gyani like Hazra be afraid of going back to the world? Mahima with a smile. Sir, that would be a pertinent question if Hazra were a Gyani. Poor Hazra. He gets so much teasing. Master smiling. Oh, Hazra has attained everything. He is just a little attachment to the world because of his children and a small debt. As people say, my aunt is now in perfect health, only she's slightly ill. That's, I just had that conversation with my own mother. A long list of complaints, and at the end, oh, but everything's fine. We're doing well. Mahima, where, sir, is Hazra's knowledge? Master smiling. Oh, you don't know? Everybody says that Hazra is quite a man. Everybody knows that he lives in the Dakshineshwar temple garden. People talk of nothing but Hazra. Who would bother to mention my name? Everyone laughs. Hazra, you, sir, are incomparable. You have no peer in the world, therefore nobody understands you. Master, there you are. To be sure, no one can have dealings with the incomparable, so why should people mention me at all? Mahima, what does he know, sir? He will do your bidding. Master, that is not so. You had better ask him about it. He said to me, you and I are on even terms. Mahima, well, he argues a great deal. Master, now and then he teaches me a lesson. Everyone laughs. Sometimes I scold him when he argues too much. Later, when I am lying in bed inside the mosquito curtain, I feel unhappy at the idea of having offended him. So I leave the bed and go to Hazra and salute him, and then I feel peace of mind. To Hazra, why do you address the pure Atman as Ishvara? The pure Atman is inactive and is the witness of the three states. When I think of the acts of creation, preservation, and destruction, then I call the pure Atman Ishvara. What is the pure Atman like? It is like a magnet lying in a great distance from a needle. The needle moves, but the magnet lies motionless, inactive. So it acts like a divine principle, it seems. That's a very interesting uh, little illustration there. It kind of helps because you have that absolute unchanging, and yet somehow you have the power of God, the constant change also, and it's sourced in Brahman, but Brahman does not change. And so there's this mystery about how the two uh, exist uh, in that way. It seems contradictory, but this idea of a magnet is quite excellent because the magnet is unmoving, unchanging. It's just sitting there, but its effect, its principle, is affecting the things around it, even though it doesn't move and it doesn't necessarily have a specific relationship with that thing. It just has an effect on it because of the nature of things. So that helps quite a bit to see Brahman that way, that this is a way of metaphoring how Brahman changes. My goodness, must we keep dinging? It is like a magnet lying on at a great distance from a needle. The needle moves, but the magnet lies motionless, inactive. Toward evening, Sri Ramakrishna was pacing the room. M was sitting alone, thinking. Suddenly, the master said to him tenderly, "Please give me a couple of linen shirts. As you know, I cannot use everybody's things. I thought of asking Captain for the shirts, but you had better give them to me." M felt highly gratified and said, "As you please, sir." At dusk, incense was burnt in Sri Ramakrishna's room, and, as usual, he bowed down before the pictures of gods and goddesses on the walls and chanted their names softly. From outside, one could hear the murmuring of the Ganges, the music of the evening worship in the temples of Kali, Vishnu, and Shiva. Through the door, one could see the priest at a distance, moving from one temple to another, a bell in his left hand and a light in his right, an attendant carrying the gong. The evening melody was in harmony with the spirit of the hour and place, and with the innermost thoughts of the worshippers. For the time being, the sordid things of daily life were forgotten. Later, Sri Ramakrishna was seated in his room, in his usual blissful mood. Ishan had come from Calcutta. He had burning faith in God. He used to say, if a man leaves the house with the hallowed name of Durga on his lips, then Shiva himself protects him with his celestial weapons. Right? Ah, that must be the very verse right there. I've always wondered about that tradition whenever a monk leaves the monastery and is driving out off of the driveway, how the devotees and the monks will stand together, folded hands, and chant Durga, 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 as everybody drives away. And so this is probably the source of that, right? That he says, no, where is it? If a man leaves the house with the hallowed name of Durga on his lips, then Shiva himself protects him with his celestial weapons. Marvelous. Master to Ishan, you have great faith, but I haven't so much. Paul laughed. God can be realized only through faith. Ishan, yes, sir. Master, you practice religious rites, japa and fasting and the like. That is very good. If a man feels sincerely drawn to God, then God makes him practice all of these disciplines. The devotee will certainly realize God if he practices them without desiring their results. A devotee observes many rites because of the injunctions of the scriptures. Such devotion is called Vaidhi Bhakti. But there is a higher form of devotion known as Raga Bhakti, which springs from the yearning and love for God. Prahlada had such devotion. When the devotee develops that love, he no longer needs to perform prescribed rites. Here's a Neri, just a moment. All right. Yeah, this is a nice idea that as you feel, as you draw closer to God, as you get closer, He then inspires you to do your practice. He inspires you then to pick up and do some japa, some chanting of the name. right? He puts the taste for singing his praises and songs, you know. He controls your schedule. He gives you more time to do it. He starts to open your life up so you have space to do that extra practice and that studying, and also takes away some of your duties so that you have time for the mind to spend in that place where it's not responsible for worldly things. So, and then if you practice, he says, if you practice them without desiring the results, right? So this is why we talk about not having a practice for gaining, right? Not to think about your practice being for realizing God at some future date, but to use your practice to enjoy the presence, to enjoy God now, and to surrender into God, right? And that way you're not thinking about fruits, you're not thinking about creating karma by doing something that has a result in some future time. You really are doing your surrendering in the moment, and that is not a karmic thing. That's a release of karma, you know, as you sit there in the presence. It's November 9th in 1884. Sri Ramakrishna was in his room, seated on the small couch and facing the east. The devotees were sitting on the floor. It was about midday when M arrived and took a seat after saluting the master. Gradually, other devotees began to gather. Vijay Krishna Goswami was there with several Brahmo devotees. The priest, Ram Chakravarti, was also present. Mahimacharan, Narayan, and Kishori arrived a few minutes later. It was the beginning of winter. Sri Ramakrishna had felt the need of some shirts and had asked M to bring them. Besides two broadcloth shirts, M had brought an other of heavy material for which Ramakrishna had not asked. The master to M, "You had better take that one back with you. You can use it yourself. There is nothing wrong in that. Tell me, what kind of shirt did I ask you to bring?" "Sir, you told me to get you plain ones. You didn't ask me to buy the heavier one." Master, "Then please take the heavier one back." To Vijay and the others, "You see, Dwaraka Babu gave me a shawl. The Marwari devotees also brought one for me. I couldn't accept." Vijay interrupted the master, saying, "That is right, sir. If a man needs a thing, he must accept it, and there must be a man to give it. Who but a man will give?" Master, "The giver is the Lord himself." The mother-in-law said to her daughter-in-law, "My child, I see that everybody has someone to render him a little personal service. It would be so nice if you would find someone to massage your feet." The daughter-in-law said, "Mother, God himself will massage my feet. I don't need anyone else." She spoke thus because she was a sincere lover of God. So what the master is saying here, for uh, for monks, we're not supposed to lay up for the future, right? And so if Ramakrishna asked for two shirts that he needed now because he needed those clothes to wear now, and then, M was quite proud that the master had asked him to get the shirts. If you remember that a few minutes ago, we read that. And so he brought a third one because he was eager and zealous, right? He wanted to proactively do more. But the master couldn't accept that third shirt because he didn't need that now. It would be laying it up for use later. And for a monk, not for a householder now, to be clear on that. Monks are not allowed to lay up money or possessions for using in the future. But households, that's part of your duty. So it's not a teaching for the householders here. And also to understand, that's another good point, because Vijay is there, and he says, "Who is there but a but a man to give you something, Your support comes from the devotees." And Ramakrishna makes a very important statement. He says, "No, my support comes from God, and God works through his devotees." Right? And so it's a lesson in giving. When you give something to the temple, or you give something for a worship, or if you want to give something to a monk, uh, it's always important to understand that you're giving it. So when you let go of it, what happens to it is no longer your concern, right? And so I say that like in the temple when people would bring food or something to offer, They always wanted to, well, some, not everybody, a few of them would want to be able to control where it went on the offering plate and when it went into the offering and how it was and all of that. And it's important to know that once you let go of it, you've offered it. Now you have no strings to it anymore at all. Those strings belong to egoism, right? Those strings belong to egoism. And so when you are trying to control your offering, you're polluting it with your own will. And so you need to, when you give something to the divine, when you give something to God, you let go of it. And it should be that way in your mind too. Even if you're offering it to a swami or if you're offering it to the temple, if you're offering it to whatever, always remember when you set it down and offer it, you're handing it to God. And so you leave it in God's hands. It will go there. And if God wants it to go to that monk, it'll go to that monk. I remember when I was a brahmachari in San Francisco, Lalita, actually, my the one I tell you about, she brought me a pair of socks. And I told her, as a brahmachari, I was not allowed to accept any gifts from the devotees. They would have to give them to the Swami, and then the Swami would distribute them as he saw fit. And so I told her, I said, I can't, I know it's just a pair of socks, but I can't accept them. Please give them to Swami, and if you want, tell them you're giving them to me. And so she gave those socks to Swami. I never saw them. They never came to me. I asked Swami about it, and he says, "Oh, do you not have enough socks?" I said, "Oh no, Maharaj, I had some." And he said, "Ah, well, these are in the temple. I've given them, and they've gone elsewhere." I was like, "Okay, Maharaj." So it's like that. So it is an important thing when you give to the Lord, like that. Don't have anything in your mind about how it will be used or what will be done with it. You make the offering in faith, and Mother accepts it from you graciously, but she's going to do with it what she does with it. And so don't get too upset if it's not exactly what you thought would happen to it, right? The master, the giver is the Lord himself, right? Once a fakir went to the Emperor Akbar to ask for money. The emperor was saying his prayers. He prayed, "O Lord, give me money, give me wealth." The fakir started to leave the palace, but the emperor motioned to him to wait. After finishing his prayers, Akbar came to the holy man and said, "Why were you going away?" The fakir replied, "You yourself were begging for money and wealth. So I thought if I must beg, that I would beg of God and not of a beggar." Vijay, I saw a sadhu at Gaya. He did not take the initiative in anything. One day he wanted to feed some devotees. Suddenly we found that butter and flour, fruits, and other foodstuff had arrived from no one knew where. Master to Vijay and the others. There are three classes of sadhus, right? Sadhus are people who've dedicated to their personal practice, to their spiritual life. There are three classes of sadhus, the good, the mediocre, and the bad. The good sadhu makes no effort to get his food. The dandies, among others, belong to the mediocre bad classes. To get food, the mediocre sadhu will knock at the door of a house and say, "Namo Narayana." The bad sadhu starts a quarrel if he doesn't get his alms. The good sadhu behaves like a python. He sits in one place and the food comes to him. The python doesn't move from where it is. A young sadhu who has been a brahmachari from his boyhood went out to beg. A young girl offered him alms. The sadhu saw her breasts and thought that she had abscesses. He asked about them. The elderly women of the family explained that she would someday be a mother and that God had given her breasts in order to give milk to her children. God had provided for all of this beforehand. At these words, the young sadhu was struck with wonder. He said, "Then I don't need to beg. God must have provided for me too." Some of the devotees thought in that case they should not take any initiative either. The mind. That's wonderful. Some of the devotees thought that in that case, they should not take any initiative either. Master, but those who think that an effort is needed must make the effort, right? Therein lies the rub, right? If you have any sense inside that you need to go and get the food or to do that certain thing, it won't do any good to reach above your star, and not do it because even if you have the head knowledge of that, you have to be true to where you are. That's very important in Vedanta. That's why when we have spiritual discussions on Vedanta philosophy, you always have to make sure that who's ever in the conversation with you, that you know where you're putting the pin in. Is God separate from you and apart? Are you a part of God and God is the whole? Or are you God, right? And you have to put the pin in one of those three places so you know what level of consciousness the conversation's going to have because there's lots of Vedantists that like to cheat in their spiritual arguments. You'll be arguing at this level down here and you'll be winning the argument, and suddenly they'll go and grab a point from, way up here and bring it in and say, well, we're all one, so what's there to argue about? And suddenly there's no resolution because they pulled the trump card, right? They ended the conversation by grabbing a higher ideal from the top and applying it incorrectly, actually, at the current level. And so the you can't argue that way. You can't argue for truth that way anyway. You can't argue. And when I say argue, I mean discuss for moving into truth. I don't mean trying to prove your points. I mean talking together to arrive at a common truth together. But those who think that an effort is needed must make the effort. Vijay. There is a nice story about that in the Bhaktamala. Master. Oh, tell it to us. Vijay. Oh, would you please tell us yourself? Master. No, you tell it. I don't remember it very well. One should hear these things at the beginning. That is why I listened to them years ago. But now I'm no longer in that mood. Hanuman said, I don't know the position of the stars or the phase of the moon. I only think of Rama. Right. So again, he's showing how our mind and our practice changes as we advance. Once we've come to that place where the name of God is constantly sounding in the mind, and he mentions if your hair on your arm stands up on its end when God's name is mentioned, then when you've reached that level, you don't need practice anymore as such. That your time with God is true time with God. You're not trying to purify anymore. You've been purified, and now you're having direct experience of the divine. And the sign of that, he says, is like when you say the name of God or or hear the name of God, your hair on your arm will stand up. You'll get that chill inside as the thought of God is brought to you. So he says that, and here he's just telling him, that at the beginning that you should uh, do all of your practice. And Bhaktamala is the same, using your japam, your beads to say your japam. And so he says at the beginning, we should hear these stories and hear all these aspects and learn all of this material. But after the name of God is ringing in your head all of the time, then it's not so important for you to go and read and study those things because you've transcended books. You've transcended even Holy Company at that point because you are walking directly with God. And this is not in a metaphorical sense. Someone at this level hears God, walks with God in that sense, but it is that is the one of the most beautiful forms of grace, let's say. The chatak bird craves only rainwater. The chatak bird is it's a mythological bird. It doesn't actually exist, although Ramakrishna at that time thought that it did. It was kind of sort of village wisdom, as it were. And so this chatak bird never touches the earth, right? He says the bird craves only rainwater, and when it is dying of thirst, it turns its beak upward and wants only water from the sky. The Ganges, the Jamunu, and the seven rivers are filled to the brim, but still it will not touch the water of the earth. Rama and Lakshmana visited Pampa Lake. Lakshmana saw a crow very eager for water. Again and again it went to the edge of the water, but would not drink. Lakshmana asked Rama about it. Rama said, Brother, this crow is a great devotee of God. Day and night it repeats the name of Rama. Its throat is parched with thirst, but still it won't drink for fear of missing a repetition of Rama's name. On a full moon night, I said to Haladhari, Brother, is it the night of the new moon? Everyone laughs. Smiling, Ramakrishna goes on, Yes, it's true. Once I told that a characteristic of a man of perfect knowledge is that he cannot distinguish between the full moon and the new moon. But how could one convince Haladhari of that? He said, This is certainly the dark Kali Yuga. He cannot distinguish the full moon from the new moon, and people respect him. Mahimatron enters the room. Right? So you see, he's giving us clues here of someone who's highly advanced in spiritual life. They are so their consciousness is so transcendent even to the body that they're not aware of what time of day it is. They're not aware of whether it's the new moon or the full moon, because they're not in the senses at all. They've completely gathered themselves into the shrine of the heart and are almost fully there in the presence of God. This is a stage just before merging, just before going into that one without a second. Master respectfully to Mahimatharan, come in, sir. Please take a seat. To Vijay and the other devotees, in the ecstatic state of mind, I cannot remember a date. The other day there was a religious festival at Beni Paul's garden. I forgot the date. I can no longer remember the last day of the month, when it is very auspicious to repeat the name of God. Sri Ramakrishna remained thoughtful for a few minutes. Master, but I remember if a man makes an engagement to visit me. A man attains this state when his mind is 100% absorbed in God. When Hanuman returned from Ceylon, Rama said to him, You have seen Sita. Tell me, how did you find her? Hanuman said, O Rama, I saw that only the body of Sita lay there. It held neither her mind nor her soul. She has indeed consecrated her mind and soul to your lotus feet. Therefore I saw only her body in Ceylon. Further, I saw the king of death prowling about, but what could he do? It was only a body. It had neither a mind nor a soul. That's an amazing statement. Uh, Sita is Rama's wife, and she has given her soul, heart and soul to Rama. And we usually talk about that in a metaphorical sense, like, oh, I give you my heart and soul. But in this case, Hanuman is saying, she gave her heart and soul to you. So I only got to see her body. I didn't even get to talk to her because you own her heart and soul. If you meditate on an ideal, you will acquire its nature, right? So if you sit there and think about it, there's a wonderful story about Vivekananda when he was camping. He went camping with 5 Western women in a bunch of tents up at Camp Taylor in San Francisco. And there's a little grove of redwoods there, and it's right next to a creek. And you can actually go to this place where they camped. You can go there now, and in the book on Trigunatita, I think it is, you can see all of there's pictures in there of the campsite and where the tents were and all of that thing. And so you can go there and stand where Swamiji stood, and see where all the tents were set up. And anyway, one night Vivekananda, they were getting ready to meditate, and he told them, he said, meditate on whatever you like. As for me, I'm going to meditate on the heart of a lion, for that gives strength. Right? So this is Ramakrishna. Here is the teaching that inspired Vivekananda to think of a lion. If you meditate on an ideal, you will acquire its nature. If you think of God day and night, you will acquire the nature of God. A salt doll went into the ocean to measure its depth, right? So a doll made of salt jumps into the ocean to find out how deep the ocean is. It became one with the ocean. What is the goal of books and scriptures? The attainment of God. A man opened a book belonging to a sadhu. He saw the word Rama written on every page. There was nothing else. If a man loves God, even the slightest thing kindles spiritual feeling in him. Then, repeating the name of Rama but once, he gets the fruit of 10 million sandhyas. At the sight of a cloud, the peacock's emotion is awakened. He dances, spreading his tail. Radha had the same experience. Just the sight of a cloud recalled Krishna to her mind. Chaitanya Deva, that was considered another incarnation of God, was passing a village. He heard the drums were made from the earth of that place. At once he was overwhelmed with ecstasy because the drums were used in kirtan, the singing of God's names and glories. But who can have this spiritual awakening? Only he who has renounced his attachment to worldly things. If the sap of attachment is totally dried up in a man, the slightest suggestion kindles his spiritual emotion. Though you strike a wet match 1,000 times, it will not produce a spark. But if it is dried, the slightest rubbing will set it aflame. Right? So this is an important thing, you know. It's a hard teaching because he's saying, you know, if you overcome your attachments, if you renounce your attachments and you manage to gather your energies into the body rather than going out through the senses and having all these desires, he says that when you've successfully broken most of those attachments, then almost everything will start reminding you of God. You'll be brought to tears multiple times a day. You'll see like some of the things that Ramakrishna saw. He was walking through the park and he saw an English boy standing there with his leaning against the tree with his legs, bent one across the other, kind of like at the knees, like you stand when you're relaxed. And that's how Krishna's always, uh, I was going to say photographed, but painted. That's how Krishna was painted. And so it made Ramakrishna immediately think of Krishna. And then he went into ecstasy, went into samadhi right then and there. He saw an old man with a walking stick, and he found that the walking stick was made of the same wood that Krishna's flute was made of. And so immediately he goes into samadhi because of that. And so this is how we know that we're in egoism, right? Egoism is what's preventing us from having that experience. And egoism is formed because we've identified with worldly attributes as ourself. And so we can't feel that level of subtlety. We can't. We're paying attention to the gross things, the things that have manifested, the things that have this kind of reality, right? And so we live in the world of the senses and we can't see the world of the spirit. We can't experience it directly until have identified ourself as spirit and begun to withdraw our interest in material, right? And then the mind begins to become more subtle because it's not being pulled out and yelled at by the senses anymore. And it can hear the quieter truths that are within us, right? Pain and pleasure are inevitable in a body. He who has realized God dedicates his mind and life, his body and soul to God. When Rama and Lakshmana went to take their bath in the Pampa lake, they thrust their bows into the ground. Coming out of the water, Lakshmana took out his bow and found its tip stained with blood. Rama said to him, "Oh, look, brother, look. Perhaps we have hurt some creature." Lakshmana dug in the earth and found a big bullfrog. It was dying. Rama said to the frog in a sorrowful voice, "Why didn't you croak? We should have tried to save you. You croak lustily enough when you are in the jaws of a snake." The frog said, "O Lord, when I am attacked by a snake, I croak, saying, 'O Rama, save me. O Rama, save me.' This time I found that it was Rama who was killing me, so I kept silent." Right? Let's look at that resignation, that surrender, right? Rama killed him accidentally, but because he knew that it was Rama that killed him, he didn't even ask, didn't even call out, didn't even cry out in pain. Just accepted it because he knew it was from the divine, from God, right? And that's the same way that we're trying to understand that we're in direct relationship with God and that everything going on in our life is God's dance with us. And when we come to know that and come to trust the nature of that, of everything that happens, as being rooted in love, a pure love from God, then it's very easy for us to accept the difficulties in life. through our surrender. Because we trust it was done in love, like this frog. That, he just trusted it was God's will that he be dead. And so he accepted it. Sri Ramakrishna remained silent for a few minutes, watching the devotees. He had heard that Mahimacharan did not believe in following a guru. Oh, I should bring this verse to next Friday. Sri Ramakrishna remained silent a few moments, watching the devotees. He had heard that Mahimacharan did not believe in following a guru. He began the conversation again. Master, a man should have faith in the words of his guru. He doesn't have to look into the guru's character. Though my guru visits a grog shop, still he is the embodiment of eternal bliss. A man who used to give recitals of the Chandi and the Bhagavata once said, "A broomstick is itself unclean, but it cleans dirty places." Right? That's an interesting idea. So the broom is impure, right? Because it's dirty from previous cleanings, but it's still used to clean up something else. And so he's saying that even though your teacher may have faults, God is still using him to teach you, right? And so you just have to accept when it's time for you to have a different guru, God will give you a different guru, a different teacher, right? But for the time being, if that's your guru, then you accept that as your guru. And like we've mentioned before, there's a great value in that because it takes humility to accept a guru that you don't approve of or that you don't think is good enough for you, right? It takes a certain amount of humility. And that is the point, because all of our practices are to remove egoism, right? So that we can see God, so that we can be reminded constantly to the point of tears, of presence. Mahimacharan studied the Vedanta. His aim was to attain Brahmagyana, right? The knowledge of Brahman, the highest. He wants the highest realization. He followed the path of knowledge, so he was a jnana yogi, and was always reasoning, right? Always discerning. The master to Mahima. The aim of the jnani is to know the nature of his own self. This is knowledge. This is liberation. The true nature of the self is that it is the Supreme Brahman. I and the Supreme Brahman are one, but this knowledge is hidden on account of Maya, right? On account of egoism. We can't see these truths. I said to Harish, this is the whole thing. The gold is hidden under a few basketfuls of earth, and you must remove the earth. The bhaktas, those who are practicing the devotional path, bhakti yoga, the bhaktas retain I consciousness. The jnanis do not, right? Because the bhaktas love God and they want to enjoy loving God and being in God's company. So they retain their sense of I. They hold on to their sense of I. A jnani, his goal is to merge into God, not to enjoy God, but to merge himself into God, to return to his true nature, right? So the bhaktas retain I consciousness and the jnanis do not. Nangta used to teach how to establish oneself in the true self, saying, merge the mind in the buddhi and the buddhi in the Atman, and then you will establish yourself in the true self, right? So merge the mind in the buddhi. The buddhi is that discerning power of the mind. So merge the mind into the buddhi, and then the buddhi into the Atman. The Atman is the individual soul, probably in this case. Atman can also mean Brahman, that undivided one without a second. They use that word in many ways. So, but here he's probably talking about the individuated soul. So you merge the mind into buddhi, and then buddhi into the Atman. Then you will be established in your true self, right? But the I persists. It cannot be got rid of. Imagine a limitless expanse of water, above and below, before and behind, right and left. Everywhere there is water. In that water is placed a jar filled with water. There is the water inside the jar and water outside, but the jar is still there. The I is the jar, right? The I is us taking a particular, taking a form. Even after attaining knowledge, the Gyani keeps his body as before, but the fire of knowledge burns away his lust and other passions. Many days ago, during an electric storm, a thunderbolt struck the Kali temple. We saw that no injury had been done to the doors, only the points of the screws were broken. The doors are the body, and the passions, lust and so forth are the screws. A Gyani loves to talk only about God. He feels pained if one is talking about worldly things. But a worldly man belongs to a different class. He always has the turban of ignorance on his head. He always comes back to worldly topics. Right? He'll start out talking spiritual, but eventually it'll get to football. Right. The Vedas speak of the seven planes of the mind. When the Gyani's mind ascends to the fifth plane, he cannot listen to anything or talk of anything but God. At that stage, only words of wisdom come from his lips. The Vedas speak of Sat Chit Ananda Brahman. Brahman is neither one nor two. It is between one and two. It cannot be described either as existence or as non-existence. It is between existence and non-existence. When the devotee develops raga bhakti, or a passionate love for God, he realizes him, but one loses vaidha bhakti, or formal devotion, as easily as one gains it. This is formal devotion. So much japa, so much meditation, so much sacrifice and homa, so many articles of worship and recitation of so many mantras before the deity. Such devotion comes in a moment and goes in a moment. Many people say, well, friend, we have lived on Havashya for so many days, Havishya, for so many days. How many times we have worshipped the deity at our home, and what have we achieved? But there is no falling away from raga bhakti. And who gets this passionate love for God? Those who have performed many meritorious deeds in their past birth, or those who are eternally perfect. Think of a dilapidated house, for instance. While clearing away the undergrowth and rubbish, one suddenly discovers a fountain fitted with a pipe. It has been covered with earth and bricks, but as soon as they are removed, the water shoots up. Those who have passionate love for God do not say any such thing as, "Oh, brother, how strict I have been about food. But what have I achieved?" New farmers give up cultivating if their fields do not yield any crops, but hereditary farmers will continue to cultivate their fields whether they get a crop or not. Their fathers and grandfathers were farmers. They know that they too must accept farming as their means of livelihood. Only those who have developed raga bhakti for God may be called his sincere devotees. God becomes responsible for them. If you enter your name in a hospital register, the doctor will not discharge you until you are cured. Those who are held by God have nothing to fear. The son who holds to his father while walking along a narrow ridge of a paddy field may slip if he absent-mindedly let go of his father's hand. But if the father holds the son by the hand, there is no such danger. So he's just talking about this state of raga bhakti. It's this God intoxication, this intense love for God, and it's an established love. It's an established level, so you can't come down from it. You don't forget it. Once you've gotten that, you've been changed permanently, right? And so you only at that point you have a pure love for God. You have a love for God for his own sake. It has nothing to do with the fact that you're enjoying him or that he takes care of you or he's given you so much. None of those measures are in your mind anymore. You are just with God, and because you have always belonged with God. And you're not trying to get anything or need anything from that. And so when you have that kind of love for God, Ramakrishna says in another place that God is very conservative about giving anybody that kind of love for him. And the devotee says, well, why is that? And he said, because God becomes a slave of such a devotee and cannot resist his requests. And so God is very conservative about giving any of us that pure love for him because he becomes enslaved to us. He can't say no to us. It's like the love, grandma's love. Right. Grandma's love. It's the love that if the child asks for 10 pieces of candy, grandma's going to give him 10 pieces of candy. And of course, mama is going to get very upset with grandma. And so this is what Ramakrishna is saying. I give out that kind of love very rarely because, I get in trouble for it because I can't say no to my devotees when they love me like that.
So is that Raga Bhakti like what was for Radharani? No.
The other one is just conventional devotion. We do our practice, we sing our songs, we do all of that, but it's not a rooted devotion. It's a devotion that we're focusing on and working on and trying to build with. But it's one when we get up from our meditation, we're instantly off and just doing our thing. We're not walking around in a stupor of love for God for the rest of the day. Whereas someone in Raga Bhakti would be. They would be intoxicated for the whole rest of the day.
It's
Uh,
like the gopis.
yes, exactly like the gopis. Yes, that's exactly the kind of love we're looking for. A love for God just because God is love. We don't have to be purchased. We fall in love with love. And when we begin to recognize it and begin to see it in the world, when we start becoming spiritually sensitive inside, then it builds. You know, it becomes our beauty. It becomes what life is for us, for the seekers. Is there anything that is impossible for faith? And a true devotee has faith in everything. The formless reality, God with form, Rama, Krishna, the Divine Mother, right? So when our faith is mature, it's not a faith in a particular. We see that Durga is the same as the goddess of well, oh, that is Lakshmi. Lakshmi is the same as Saraswati, is the same as Holy Mother, is the same as Kali, is the same as Durga. You no longer make those distinctions. It's just Ma. You can't even really finish the word anymore. We start off saying mother, right? But once we start having the experience of mother, it becomes Ma. We can't even finish the word. It's just Ma, right? And then when it becomes even more intense, it's just open mouth, like awe, Ma. You're not saying anything anymore. You're just stunned in the presence. Once, while going to Karmarpur, I was overtaken by a storm. I was in the middle of a big meadow. The place was haunted by robbers. I began to repeat the names of all of the deities, Rama and Krishna and Bhagavati. I also repeated the name of Hanuman. I chanted the names of them all. What does that mean? Well, let me tell you. While the servant is counting out the money to purchase supplies, he says, these pennies are for 4 potatoes, these are for 4 eggplants, and these are for fish. He counts the money separately. But after the list is completed, he puts the coins together. When one develops love of God, one likes to talk only of God. If you love a person, you love to talk and to hear about them. A worldly person's mouth waters while he talks about his son. If someone praises his son, it will be left at once and say to the boy, go and get some water for your uncle to wash his feet. Those who love pigeons are highly pleased if you praise pigeons before them. But if you speak ill of pigeons, they will give you at once an exclamation. Has anyone in your line of 14 generations ever raised a pigeon? Right? That's how we all love our own things. You can tell somebody who loves music, you talk to them about, they love to talk about music, right? That's like Ramakrishna with hemp smokers, people smoking pot. He says whenever they meet each other, there's such great joy. They embrace each other, even though they don't know each other at all, just because they're fellow hemp smokers. Sri Ramakrishna now addressed Mahimatran, who was a householder. Master, what need is there of renouncing the world altogether? It is enough if you can rid yourself of attachment. But you must have sadhana. You must have a spiritual practice, he says. You have to fight the sense organs, right? Because our bodies, and since we're attached to our bodies, we're very affected by them because of the attachment. And so all the hormones and, all of the urges and all of the desires and all of the histories of the body are constantly trying to actuate themselves, right? Always trying to get your attention. And so he's saying that you have to rid yourself of this attachment. This is what is ruining your life. The attachment to worldly things, to things that pass away. Being attached to them is what's distracting you from what life is really about. It's what's preventing you from experiencing samadhi. It's what's preventing you from experiencing the true presence of God. So you must rid yourself of attachment. You must have a spiritual practice, and you have to fight the sense organs, right? You have to keep yourself in control so that these things don't take over, right? Because the sense organs aren't content with one service, right? As soon as you're finished with one service, they want another one, and you want more, and then you want a different kind and more, and then you want two, and then you want three, and then you want more of that, right? It's one of those things that keeps getting bigger, and every time you give in to your desires, Ramakrishna says it's like throwing gasoline on a fire. That fire just increases. The enjoyment of it increases, the desire for it increases, and the intensity of it increases. It is a great advantage to fight from inside of a fort. You get much help from the fort. The world is the place for enjoyment. After enjoying different things, you should give them up one by one. Once I had a desire to put a gold chain around my waist. I obtained one at last and put it on, but I had to take it off immediately. Once I ate some onion. While eating it, I discriminated, oh mind, this is onion. Then I moved it to different places in my mouth, and at last I spat it out. Right? So he's saying, when you enjoy things, if you take God with you, if you take your sobriety with you, and sobriety doesn't mean, in this case, not freedom from drugs or alcohol. Sobriety means freedom from desire of the world, right? That we want to come to a sobriety where we are no longer drunk or colored by the desires that we have of the world for enjoyments. We're no longer controlled by them. They don't lure us into engagement anymore, right? And so he's saying that if you enjoy your enjoyments while you are discerning and while you are thinking of God, that you will see the reality of your desires and you will understand the true nature of what it is that you're desiring, and the desire will diminish because you will see that it is God alone that you desire being reflected in that object and not the object itself, right? And so if you discern like that, this is how we get ready for renunciation. This is how we carry out a mature renunciation. A musician was expected. He was to sing with his party. Sri Ramakrishna asked the devotees every now and then. Oh, it's 5:30. Where is the musician? Mahima, we're quite all right as we are. Master, no, sir. You get all of this through the year. The devotee outside the room said, oh, the musician has come. Sri Ramakrishna was filled with joy and said, oh, has he? Mats were spread on the floor in a long veranda across the northeast of the master's room. Sri Ramakrishna said, sprinkle a little Ganges water on the mats. Many worldly people have sat on them. All right. And we'll go ahead and enjoy that concert next week.